Hey folks, this is Wayne doing some post commentary for the first time ever. So if this is a little rusty, a little weird, you can blame it on that. I'm here in the depths. We're doing a bonus video for the second episode of the Spellblade stream, and I decided to cover the first part of Blighttown, Upper Blighttown, if you will, since it's actually completely optional. The master key will let us get in through the back way, and starting right off into the water wheel leading to the swamp, and we skip probably the worst part of it, actually. Right here I'm going through the spells, make sure I have my typical loadout. The hardest part about the upper part of Blighttown is actually right at the beginning. There are three of those. I was calling them trolls. The others were calling them undead barbarians, infested barbarians, whatever. They probably might go and link to the Dragon Warrior Troll if you don't know what they look like, kind of where I get the idea from. But those are the roughest part of it, and they're right at the beginning, so you want to make sure you have Hidden Body, and so that you only have to fight one of them at a time. And enough spells to blast them at a distance if it comes to that is good too. This is me running up ahead so the slimes all fall behind me, so I get a chance to farm them. I opened up grabbing a I don't even remember already, Green Titanite, I think. They could drop green shards and large shards. They're one of the two types of enemies that do that. The other ones are the leeches, which I don't think I actually show off farming. I think I make one run along the swamp later on to show that they are there. I don't know how many I actually get. The leeches are by far the more preferable target. They drop one large shard, or if the lottery decides to give you the green ones, you actually get 5 at once. And considering it takes 10 to upgrade a basic item from +1 to +5, 10 is really all you need. But until you get to Blighttown, the slimes pretty much have to do. And it works okay. I mean, there are 6 of them right there outside that bonfire. That's pretty expedient. And I don't know how the drop rate compares between the two critters, but and it also helps too if especially in the days before we found out about the item duplication glitch. If you had to farm the rats for humanities, then those were also just right down the stairs. You hang a right, and there's 5 there, 4 to the other side. There are 2 covenants, and I mentioned this in the fourth video. I think it'll be the 4th, that require you to use up. Basically, you have to give them items to raise your rank in the covenant, and 2 of them use up humanities, and the ratio goes 10, 30, 80. So yeah, if you want to fully max out both of them, it's 160 humanity. I never actually did both of them. I think I did one of them all the way, the other one not. And yeah, that's a lot of rats. So at that point, if you're doing that run multiple times, why not kill the slimes while you're at it and get some shards. This is actually me just kind of taking a second and wondering exactly how far away they aggro. I wasn't sure if it was going to work its way to me or not. So that would just a little bit of amusement, and turns out rewarded for my patience. Off to the up ahead and to the right is, I think I mentioned that's where Domhnall is. I haven't actually shown him off yet. And I need to do that before we get too much later in there. He's the guy that sells boss armor. Some of them, not all of them. But he does that, and some of them are actually pretty good. They tend not to be upgradable, but in exchange for having some pretty decent basic stats. Take a quick look around, making sure I have everything ready. Some of these things are having some interruptions because this is the first time I've been using OBS to try to record offline. I had some issues with it. And there's the first barbarian. Yeah, they have quite a bit of distance on those swings, and you can't stagger them very easily. Yeah, there's a hit. I just took a hit right there, almost went off. And I end up, yep. Yeah, they have a they have a long attack range, and they have some very weird knockback properties. So, I'll give it another try. I put the tiara back on to, try to make it easier to get past this part. We want to be able to blast them. The fewer hits you can take to kill them, the less likely they are to get that hit off. If you have a shield, they'll still push you back a little bit. You have to be careful. It's not quite as far. I mean, if you get hit, unguarded, or if they break your guard, you go flying, like we just saw. So, I like the whipping animation for that. It's probably actually worse than most axes because it takes a little bit longer, but it does do a bit more damage. I think it's worth it. There are 2 of them up ahead, and do I remember to use Hidden Body? I did not. I must have had my reasons for assigning it and then not using it. Oh, that's right. The other one is a lot further back. That's why. Yeah, that's right. Because I was saving the Hidden Bodies for some sniper enemies. I got toxic on my way down to Blighttown the first time, and there are 4, I want to say, of those blowgun guys. In that part of Blighttown, there are 4 more in the upper part. They're scattered around quite a bit, and they're a lot more obnoxious here because of the angle they have on you. This first guy starts shooting pretty soon. You can usually see him by destroying some of that debris. Yep, yeah, I just took a hit there. They do a lot of toxic buildup. They also have the highest, and this is one thing too, that you may have noticed with the taking the poison damage from the swamp itself, that different sources of damage actually inflict that damage at different rates. The toxic that you get from the toxic mist spell is different from what the blowguns do, and it's also different from what there's some enemies that are like these hollows that are infested with parasites, in an optional dungeon later on, and those also do a small amount of damage. I mean, it counts as toxic, but it's barely stronger than poison. So all that goes to say that it depends what you get hit by is how screwed you are. And for the most part, it seems like the only reason they assign certain things toxic and certain things poison is because you're a lot less likely to have those blooming purple clumps. Luckily, as a sorcerer, the remedy spell takes care of all of it. Now, I didn't think the raw gargoyle axe that we end up using in Sense Fortress would be so useful, but it definitely is paying its dividends. It has a high enough, well, especially with two-handed, it does enough poise damage to stagger these guys, stagger a lot of enemies, and it still does, decent damage. The reason why most people don't take the raw path, and I only kind of touched on it, is it lowers your scaling. And the meta in Dark Souls is you either want to demolish enemies in one hit, or you want to safely dispatch them, and if you can safely get rid of them, then it doesn't matter how many hits as long as you unlock them down. That means stun lock. So in either case, you want to be using powerful weapons that do a lot of that poise damage. And in Dark Souls 1, the scaling you get is based on the base damage of the weapon. A weaker weapon simply won't get much benefit from scaling. And there are a couple of exceptions. So a lot of weapons have independent scaling tables. Like we find that out with the clubs. I tried that out in... I'm probably going to do that in video 3. Yeah, when I go back to farm for the blue titanite chunks, I try out the club. And the reason being is the club has a lower base damage than the reinforced club, which is why people doing level 1 runs prefer reinforced. I mean, your scaling is garbage anyway, so why not just use the higher damage? But the club actually has a higher scaling with strength. So for our purposes, it actually ends up being better. Because we have that 20 strength, that's enough to start seeing results. And I think there's a curved sword that gets abnormally high scaling with dex, and I had a lot of fun with that one in a pure dexterity build I did a little while back. dealing with the camera there. And this takes me a second to figure out how to get back down safely. The thing is, and I accidentally showed this off too. The thing is, there are a lot of places that deceptively, don't have anything beneath them. It's like it might look like there's something there. You may think it's the right place from what you've done before, but it's not. In this case, I forgot the cardinal rule of Upper Blighttown. That's always look for those torches. See the ladder to my left, how it has a torch on top of it? And that one has a torch on the bottom. What I'm supposed to do is, go around and go all the way around. Good. Good. That was me checking to see if that would kill me or not. And when you go all the way back around, you can start seeing the torches again. Right there. Yep, just missed it. This is the only bonfire in the Upper Blighttown area, and you go through a lot of grief both before and after it. So it is timely, but this is one of those things where you kind of wish, as in Dark Souls 2, there's bonfires all over the place. There may have been more than one, especially if you had the same trouble I did the first time dealing with those. Well, even if they're not literally trolls, they certainly act like them. The club barbarians are right at the start. And another thing, too, is if you're playing through the game the way it intends you to, you go through here very early. You probably won't have the... you'd have just gotten the large ember to take to Andre. And a plus 10 weapon, if you take the time to farm shards from the slimes, which you would have to do if you don't have the master key. You can't get to the leeches yet. You can't get to the swamp. Then a plus 10 weapon of pretty much any kind will take you through here no problem. The Claymore is a popular choice for that. You get it right in the Undead Parish. It scales pretty well with... Well, it scales average with Dex and Strength. But that's still good. And it has a high base damage, which means its scaling dividends are better. And it's also a pretty good moveset, too. As a matter of fact, the Claymore in this game has such a good all-around moveset with the one-handed R2, the thrust, and everything. They kind of ended up using that for a lot of the great swords in Dark Souls 2. That's kind of the tradition of Dex, or... Yeah, and that's me taking a look at the rickety bridge, and nope. And there's really no point in going across there. That's the bottom of where I'll be jumping to later to get the Iaito, and that's what I'm on my way back to get. And if you're stuck on that side, then you have to cross the bridge to get back over. But as it is, there's nothing else there. It's the bottom part of the shack that you have to jump onto, and I think there is a humanity over at the end of it, and that's it. So this is me just mulling over. I find the ladder finally, but yeah, mulling over whether to use the bonfire first so I can homeward back to it, or to go get the item, drop down, and take the risk with the rickety bridge. Because if I homeward at this point, I'm just going to go right back to the depths. Love that axe. Those guys, it's hard to get a good look at them. Those guys are actually wielding corpses, the same ones that they're the same doodads that the souls are placed on, in the world. I think it's a really neat touch. And of course, if you do kill them, the first time you kill each one that drops them, because you can't farm them for it, but the first time you kill each of those guys, it gives you a soul of an undead. Yeah, measure the step. It's actually not that hard of a jump, but I still get a little nervous every time. If you miss it and you haven't cleared out the enemies down there, you're probably going to die. There we go. The Iaito is fun. It's another katana, so it means it scales with dex, not much else. And its gimmick is that it has those... it is... I remember right, it's Japanese for like killing strike, iaijutsu, way of killing in one hit. I think that's how that works. And so it kind of has the kind of a similar thing. Its R2s involve drawing it and slashing at the same time. So it's tough to say whether either the Uchikatana is better. They each have a mixture of slashes and a stab, and the difference is which special move gets it. Is it the dash or is it the R2? I am irrationally fond of the Iaito, but yeah, katana just never really work as well for me as they seem to on paper. As it should, I should say. Okay, and I had forgotten actually that you don't actually have to cross the bridge if you drop down. That's a different part of Blighttown. So moot point. I just grabbed the Iaito and we're good. The wind up for that one where they kind of get into a, well, they're going for a hug, and they do. It's one of the first grab. I think it is the first grab attack you'll be exposed to playing through the game normally. And it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it's unblockable, which will throw people off. You know, the game expects you to be using a shield and to take cover behind it when you're being pressed by enemies. And yeah, those guys, since they do a fair bit of damage, for how unassuming they look, yeah, it'll probably get some people. It doesn't help too that if you don't go back and have a fairly strong weapon to deal with them, they actually take quite a few hits. Well, you saw how I panned the camera around to get a look at our skin when we got it from the bonfire. Yeah, that doesn't last long. Yep, I misremembered where to drop down at. There's a long fall down. Okay, so take two. Yeah, yep. Yeah, with less poison resistance now, I was actually toxic in one shot by that blowgun needle. In Demon Souls, your healing items were grasses. There were 5 types, I believe. They healed varying percentages of your bar. Well, not percentages, fixed amounts, but the strongest 2 would always be a full heal, and the strongest one, I think, removed all your statuses on top of that. But regardless, if the efficacy of healing items was halved if you were poisoned, and I had heard that was the case in Dark Souls 1, it may have been, but if it was patched. I healed myself no problem, there to get time to cast Remedy. And I'm always going to have a fond memory of one time going through the bottom part of Blighttown. I went through the part with the 4 blowgun guys, and I thought I had a blooming moss clump, but I'd already given it away to Snuggly. Ladder battle. There are only 2 ways to deal if you get caught by enemies on a ladder. You can attempt to use the attack button. That will try to kick them. It almost never works. Enemies simply have higher, I don't know if it runs off poise, if it runs off some other stat, your stamina, something like that. But whatever it is, enemies have more of it than you do. So you can try it, probably not going to work. The other 2 options are to either go back up and then hop off the ladder, try to get a plunging attack on. That works pretty well. Or to let them hit you and knock you off. You'll land on the ground. A hard knockdown in Dark Souls means you're invincible while you get back up. So then try to take advantage of that to hit them as they come back down the ladder to get you. The Eagle Shield, if you are allowed to use shields, is amazing. It's the first great shield you get, only requires 16 strength to use, and has a very high stability. As a wooden shield, it also has pretty high lightning resistance. That will get you through a good chunk of the game. You probably actually just use it. It has 95% physical block, not a perfect 100, but that's not much. Yep, definitely. I had to remind myself about the torches and the ladders, but we have that now. Plunging attacks are kind of weird. That time I didn't get the plunge, but I still got the hit. Yeah, who knows? There's another one of those blowgun guys at that ladder right up ahead. I decided to deal with him first. I don't remember what the angle on their attacks is, but it's not worth the risk. That triggers one of those barbarians. Take a look at my soul counter. I don't actually see him later, so he must have fallen off the edge. I just didn't notice it in real time. So there's 500 souls from that guy. Yeah, I don't know. This is this route takes you down and behind the big the bloated critter that we saw earlier. Yeah, it's a unique enemy. Oh, I think that was me. The souls ranking up there. It's kind of neat too when enemies have different animations. Like that shove they do, it's basically the same thing as your kick. It's to open you up and break up a combo. Just kind of neat. Yeah, this is a one-of-a-kind critter. It's actually has a lot of damage if you try to attack it on its level. If you come up behind it, it's helpless. The big reason you want to kill it is it's worth 1,000 souls, which isn't bad. You know, once again, especially your first time through the game, it might help you get a level up. But it guards Power Within, which is probably the most useful pyromancy in the game. I mean, all of them do damage. Well, not all of them, but most of them do damage. They have utility. Flash Sweat is good against Quelaag. You know, getting items in the Demon Ruins, all that fun stuff. But Power Within is a 40% bonus to your attack and your stamina recovery, and I want to say something else. And I think that may be it, but that's good enough. And the trade-off is you lose 1% of your health every. Well, I'm not sure exactly what the ratio would be, but basically you lose sufficient percentage of your health that after 1 minute it will kill you. It will do your max HP and damage. So you just have to make sure to be able to heal yourself, you know, somehow before it expires, and avoid taking hits as your health runs down. You can also use Power Within to set up the Red Tearstone Ring, which I don't think we have yet. We'll be getting it soon. It gives you a 20%, or no, I think it's 40% as well, bonus to all types of damage as long as you're below 25% HP. So you can see the obvious synergy there. You're getting a tremendous increase in your offenses, with the drawback that you'll probably die in one hit. Well, if you're using ranged attacks, you get to keep those bonuses without that risk. So needless to say, Dark Souls 2 took a nerf bat to that strategy's kneecaps. Power Within is completely gone. The only naked buff to your offense is a spell that only applies to physical, not magical. And the Red Tearstone Ring got its bonus halved. So all told, that's basically it took probably an overpowered strategy and made it worthless. You know, just overdoing it. But that's de rigueur for you know, I'm doing my finger quotes here. Balance. Yeah, you have to kind of watch yourself in Blighttown. It's very easy to. And if you slide off from where I did, from higher up, it can trigger that instant kill from sufficient height. All right, we're back to the swamp. I have one more thing to show. I think one more thing to show off here. I probably should have done this on stream, actually. That's me. Okay, I misremembered things. That was me switching to the Covetous Ring to start farming some leeches. This is the thing I should have showed off on stream, and I feel bad about that. Basically, while you're in the Forest Covenant, Shiva and his bodyguard will show up down here in the swamp. This is your only chance to kill them. If you leave the Covenant, then they won't appear. And attacking them, as you might expect, breaks the Covenant. So you only get one shot at it. If you fail, you have to go all the way back up to Oswald, you know, ask for forgiveness, go to Alvina, rejoin the Covenant, go back to Blighttown, you know, talk to them again, and then kill them, and then hope you don't die. So this is why I'm taking advantage of the swamp here to get them poisoned, to make my life a little bit easier, and kind of get some distance between them. And I use Hidden Body to kind of reset it, you know, let the poison do some damage while I heal up, then I move back in. Shiva drops the Murakumo, and which is another reference to Japanese, you know, history. And the ninja drops the Darkwood Green Ring. It's also called the Flip Ring. If you're in a light load, and they drop humanities, of course, because we murdered humans. But while you're in light load, it will change your roll animation to a flip. That's faster, goes further, and has even more invincibility frames. It is good news all around. It's one of those things that doesn't sound that amazing on paper. I had to change its animation, right? But it's actually tremendously useful. Okay, back over to Firelink, and I put the ring on, of course. Back over to Firelink, we're going to go. I was trying out the, you know, taking a look at the different weapons we got. At this point, I'm trying to decide what to upgrade with the Enchanted path. And the big issue with this, and I left some of this in here to be able to talk about this, the the way that damage works in Dark Souls, I kind of touched on this earlier, is that all creatures have a resistance value to everything. It can be very low in the case of the hollows at the start of the game to everything besides physical. As a matter of fact, some of them are even like a very low, even physical resistance. But that gradually goes higher and higher throughout the game, and you're expected to raise the parameters of your equipment to compensate for it. So you basically maintain your advantage. That leads to some problems. The enchanted, basically all the paths that work like this, divine, occult, magic, and enchanted, as well as to a lesser extent the elemental paths, fire and lightning. Split your weapon between physical damage and the bonus damage, magic, fire, or lightning. And enemies will have a resistance to both of those things. It may not be big, but they have it. And your damage drops precipitously if your damage bonus is below their defense. And if they're split, well, as you might imagine, that happens a lot more often than you think. So it's almost always better to, even if your physical stats aren't that high, to put a lot of upgrades, a lot of shards into a weapon on the normal path, and then use the buffs to enchant it. Especially if you have the int to use the crystal magic weapon, and that we'll be getting later. So the trade-off is that you do have if you have a magic bonus, you have it all the time. Certain enemies are much more vulnerable to certain types of damage than others. The lightning, not the lightning, the skeletons, for example, are like a little vulnerable to fire and very vulnerable to strike. Well, if you make a fire hammer, for example, then that does really well against them. The golems, likewise, are vulnerable to lightning and also vulnerable to strike. Well, at this point, you want a lightning hammer. The odd man out is actually magic. Very few enemies are actually vulnerable to it. So mostly we use it to try to get around things that just have a very high physical defense and average magic defense and hope for the best. This is Logan. You can, with a little camera trickery, you can take a look at his face. Otherwise, he keeps it hidden under that hood, or that hat. Is an awesome hat. Grass.
There you are. I was expecting you. As promised, I will share.
He is the other sorcery trainer. I say other. There's actually three of them. Griggs, Rickert, and Logan all teach you stuff. And a couple other merchants just scattered around will also have one or two sorceries. The guy in New Londo Ruins, for example, is the unique teacher of Resist Curse. Pretty worthless, but, for completionist sake. I canceled out of the menu there and went back in after popping some souls to be able to afford Soul Spear. That requires an int of 36, so we can't use it just yet, but we want it. Soul Spear is amazing. It has the cast speed of the Great Soul Arrows, and the damage of even higher than the heavy ones. The trade-off, of course, is you get very few casts with it. We don't need the repair box, we have the repair spell. We can simply sit at the bonfire, attune it, cast it, sit back, rinse and repeat until we've repaired everything we care to. And we're picking back up here in the Undead Burg again, on our way to visit the Undead Merchant. There were a couple items he sells I didn't get last time, and I haven't been back since then. Basically, I think I touched on this previously, but the different physical damage types, slash, thrust, and strike, and regular in this game, which is what a lot of these swords are.
Oh, there you are. Where have you been?
We've been hiding.
I guessed you'd hop the twig for certain.
I just like this guy's voice. And I don't have very many strike weapons. There simply aren't very many I can use with my stats, especially my strength as low as they are. The large club, for example, which we didn't actually farm this time, but you could from the barbarians wielding them. That takes 24. The great club is 28. You can trade something for Snuggly, or if you kill the Asylum Demon your first time, which requires black fire bombs pretty much as your gift, then you can get a Demon Great Hammer. I think that takes 50. Of course, and you can two-hand those normally to meet the strength requirements, but that's not allowed for this run. We have to use one-handed weapons. So I'm back here to buy some clubs and the chainmail we didn't get. I'm probably never actually going to wear the chainmail, but it's good to have. And here's the reason why we're doing that. I want to farm the golems here for the blue titanite chunks they can drop. I think the ones we'll be getting to later in the game have a higher drop rate, and at the very least I know they're worth more souls, so they're more profitable. But for now, this is what we have access to. They take very little damage from slash weapons, and I don't think thrust works any better. Yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense, giant crystal beings or whatever. But yeah, you can see, you might remember how it took like 4 or 5 hits with, last time, but now you pretty much two-shot them with the club. Magic weapon is another thing too that is kind of interesting with the damage scaling. The golems have very high magic resistance, and not so much so that they take less than half of what other creatures do. And the ones we'll be running into later take even less than that. I want to say they have something like 800 or 900, magic defense rating. You basically you can't scratch them with magic, basically. But for now, it's the fact that any resistance still allows some damage to get through. And if you have that source of damage, you're at least getting something out of it. So that's why I usually use magic weapon, even though it doesn't pay great dividends. And yeah, we dispatch those guys no problem. I wanted to at least show one successful gathering. It took a couple tries, as I recall. This has been a couple days since I recorded this and did the post-commentary for it. It took a little while. And I have 10 humanity, and I believe I'm wearing the covetous ring. That is me trying out something. As I recalled, the R2 is supposed to be just a big wind-up overhand swing. You wind up, swing down. And I can't get it to work. I don't know if it's the fact I'm using no, I am using a PS3 controller. I usually use a PS2 one. I wire to save the PS3. Don't want the analog sticks to go out on it. And I play a lot of fighting games and games like this where you use the sticks a lot. So I don't know if it's a calibration issue or what. But what I'm doing there is supposed to be the jumping or the holding forward attack. You press normally you hit forward along with the button at the same time. You get a different motion. Forward plus R1 is the kick. You've seen me do a couple times on the shielded enemies. And forward plus R2 varies on the weapon, but it's usually something like that. It's usually a big jump attack. And yeah, I wasn't able to get the normal R2 to work, so I may go ahead and experiment with that. And yeah, so a couple tries later, we get one blue chunk. It is what it is. I've had people say if you like Dark Souls, you should try the Monster. I almost said Monster Rancher again. Monster Hunter games. No, the farming for rare drops is the worst part of any of these games. This is back at the bonfire in the Darkroot Basin, and we're on the elevator. This takes us down to Valley of the Drakes. I don't know if I've shown this off yet or not. Heading back here. And if I didn't, the reason why is pretty obvious. These guys are a pain to fight. They have 1,000 HP, and unlike every other draconic enemy, they're resistant. Well, they're resistant to lightning for the obvious reason that they use lightning. And all of their resistances across the board are high. I think fire is the one they're the most vulnerable to, but of course, without a pyromancy hand, we can't actually use any fire. We can't use any fire damage. We do have access, if I want to do things out of order, to the barbarian, to the blacksmith that makes fire and chaos weapons. And we did pick up the Chaos Ember after we dealt with Ceaseless Discharge. So we could have made some fire weapons to go deal with this, but I wanted to show off the catacombs in due course, and that's where he is. So we'll be getting to that later. We may go ahead and make a fire weapon. That big burst of damage, I think he died before the blood spray could show. The big burst of damage at the end was Bleed finally kicking in. Bleed is probably your best way of dealing with these guys. Bleed and Poison. The resistances to both of them, or to neither one I should say, are very high. And crunch. The resistances to either status aren't very high. And you can buy poison arrows from the female merchant we bought the moss from. Yeah, the kind of creepy one that, really wants to sell you stuff. Yeah, she sells poison arrows, and I believe she also sells rotten pine resin. That is used to add a poison attachment to your melee weapons. That works pretty well too. As a matter of fact, you can combine the two by applying the rotten pine resin to a weapon that naturally has bleed, like a katana or something like that. And that's probably the best way of handling them. I'm using the Flamberge here to try out the enchantment I made on it, and yeah, I don't know if I explained that previously, But yeah, my logic for choosing the Flamberge is the fact that the wave pattern on it. I mean, the Dark Souls 2 Flamberge basically looks right. It's like I think Flammenschwert is the German word for it, the two-handed version. They also made rapiers with the wavy blade pattern. But this one is basically an oversized Chris knife. And in Demon Souls, that one was was an enchanted weapon. So I figured, hey, let's go ahead and give a nice little callback to that. Unfortunately, me having fun with a little bit of history, like a gag there, didn't serve very well here. Their magic resistance is high enough, and their physical resistance is more than high enough to basically use a Shadowrun term to stage down that damage to pretty much nothing. So I was relying on bleed. If at this point you're starting to think, well, let's just go ahead and use a faster weapon if bleed matters, well, that's what I try next. The bridge is the worst part of this. If you can fight these guys in the open, you can usually run circles around them while they're using their lightning breath, while they're trying to bite you. If you have a shield, especially the Eagle Shield I pointed out in Blighttown, that has very high stability, almost 100% physical block, and high lightning block because it's wood, then that's actually a very good choice to deal with these guys. And the big issue with that one on the bridge is that lightning stream can hit you multiple times, and if you're rolling, you get caught by the whole thing basically. It is not good times. So I re-equip, switch to lighter armor, switch to the katana. This is the Uchi katana with magic weapon going. Yet because of the damage isn't split, the base damage is almost as high as it was before, but I attack twice as quickly, and I get the bleed effect is the exact same. And bleed is, I don't know if I've explained this one, but how bleed works is that it has a effectiveness which is almost always either 30% or 50%. And with the katana it's 30%. Only a handful of weapons use the 50% bleed. Then it has a bleed build-up rating. And the enemies have a bleed resistance the same as you do. For your case, it's almost always based on your armor. I mean, I think vitality, I want to say, plays into it. I know resilience does, but screw resilience. And some enemies can have very high bleed resistance. These guys have it fairly low. It usually takes about 3 or 4 hits to get the bleed to process. So you want to just get as many hits as possible of a weapon that has a decent bleed effect, and you'll be fine. There's a weapon that's even faster than a katana for doing bleed. Well, 2 actually. The bandit knife does bleed, and that's a rare drop from the Thief Hollows. And really, if starting with a master key wasn't good enough, starting with a bandit knife is a great reason to play as a thief at the start of the game for your starting class. Just getting an item anybody else would have to farm for is a huge advantage. I don't think anybody else actually does that. That starts with a rare weapon. I think everybody else you can either buy or find it. So, and the other one is a sword we'll be getting from the first part of Anor Londo. And there are enough enemies that can drop it that even though the rate isn't very high, you're almost guaranteed to get at least one. Now this is me improvising a little bit to deal with the bridge part and to narrow this down to a more manageable fight. The Great Heavy Soul Arrow has enough poise damage to guarantee a stagger in one go. And poise is the other way to deal with these guys. If you're using a great sword or a great hammer, one hit, especially one R2 or a jumping attack, will go ahead and stagger them in one shot. And you can just wait for them to recover and stun lock them. Now, that doesn't work in this setup, because if you're not doing what I did with the invisibility, with using range to pull them to you, all of them will attack you at once. And that's pretty bad. Well, not all of them, but at least those 3 will attack you at once. And if you're dealing with one of them, the other guy strafes you with lightning, there's almost no way to win that fight. Yeah, and then now we're down to the last guy, and now I can do what I did for the first one, which is just circle around him, roll around, attacks if need be. If you have a shield, once again, even easier. Just hold down the block button as you circle them. You actually want them to do the bite attack in that case, because chances are good he'll miss if you're circling him. And if he still hits you, well, you're not going to take any damage from it. And then just keep up the offense. Once you get down to 1 in the open field, you've got him. The dragon scales that the other guy dropped they have 2 uses. They're the upgrade material for draconic weapons, The Drake Sword you can get from, it's probably the iconic dragon weapon. I didn't show it off because I plan on killing the guy legit, but yeah, the Wyvern, or the Hellkite Drake, I think, in the Undead Parish, that strafes the bridge of fire. Cutting his tail gives you the Drake Sword, and a lot of the dragon bosses, like I know I got the Dragon King axe from the Gaping Dragon. They have that, and Dragon Scales upgrade those. They're also the material you use to advance in the Dragon Covenant, which I don't think I'll be taking advantage of. It'll come late in the game. Not too many people use it. It's a PvP covenant. Not very many people use it. But yeah, I will at least show off where it is and how that system works. It's a lot of fun. Everybody should see it. The Red Tearstone Ring is it's kind of a gimmick ring, but it's still very useful. And what it does, and I think I've talked about this before too. Yeah, when I talked about Power Within. But yeah, basically, as a reminder, it is a 40% increase in damage, all sources of damage, unlike in Dark Souls 2, where it only worked for physical attacks, but all sources of damage, and as long as your health is below, I want to say it's 25%, and 40% is huge. I mean, if you're close to the enemy's defense stats with your damage, then going that high above them will amplify the damage you do because of how the system works. And even if you're not getting above the cutoff, you're almost increasing it by half again. That's very nice. This guy he's actually really easy to bait into flying off the cliff. And I talked to, she did a Dark Souls stream, or not a Dark Souls stream, a LP, got to Blighttown. Angry Mog on Something Awful, and I mentioned that to her, and her preferred strategy was, just lure the guys off the cliff. You don't get to drop that way, though, and I do plan on using at least one dragon weapon. And that's one thing that, if you guys are, that catch this, want to chip in, I would love to know your preferred way of dealing with those guys. But, is that it? Yeah, for now, that'll